All right, so upon meditating underneath the Bodhi tree, Gautama Siddhartha achieved enlightenment and became the Buddha, the awakened one. And the first sermon of the Buddha to the sadhus who he had been studying with was of the Four Noble Truths. And that's what I'd like to talk about right now. So, what are the Four Noble Truths? Four Noble Truths are these. First, all life is suffering. Secondly, that suffering arises from craving. Third, that in order to extinguish suffering, one must extinguish craving. And fourth, in order to extinguish craving, one must follow the Eightfold Path. So let me go through and explain what each of these points mean and give a little bit of a philosophical treatment to each of them. So, the first one, all life is suffering. Now you hear this and you go, man, that's kind of a pessimistic point of view. I mean, yeah, life's kind of hard sometimes, but I'm not sure all life is suffering. I mean, after all, aren't there some good things in life? I enjoy life sometimes, don't I? Well, yeah, I'm sure you enjoy life sometimes. I enjoy life sometimes. Everybody enjoys life sometimes. But that's really not what the point is. It's very important that you realize this, that suffering and pain, not the same thing here. Suffering, the Sanskrit term for it is dukkha, or in Pali, the language that the Buddha spoke. It's a derivation of Sanskrit, dukkha. That this term doesn't refer to pain. Suffering, rather, is uneasiness, incompleteness, a sense in which no matter how satisfying or lovely a particular experience is, there's always a way in which it ends and moves towards something else, in which it flows out. Kind of like the way in which water will flow out of a space if it's not contained within it. Now, you might say, well, aren't there some experiences that are just so satisfying, that's all there is to it? Well, yeah, that would be all there was to it if you could contain that experience in that moment. But the problem is, as the 70s song keeps saying, time keeps on slipping, slipping, slipping into the future. That there is no way in which something can be what it is except but for an instant. Let me give you an example of this, right? Take being in love, falling in love. Now, falling in love is great. You fall in love and you see your beloved everywhere and you think of them all the time and you hear those corny songs on the radio and they make so much sense. They're just so true, right? All these sorts of things and you just get it. Makes sense. How can that be bad? How can that be suffering? How can that speak to the First Noble Truth? Well, I'll tell you how it can speak to the First Noble Truth. One of two things is going to happen from that experience. Someone is going to fall out of love or someone is going to die. And there ain't no way around that. One of those two things is going to happen. And when that happens, that love, that tra-la-la that you're experiencing and enjoying so much, it's going to end, and it's going to end forever. It's going to be gone forever. A new baby is born, and you go, oh my God, look at this baby. So beautiful, so precious, so much hope, so much promise. How can you deny that? Well, I'll tell you what. One thing is certain that is going to happen to that baby, despite everything else that's going to happen to that baby in that baby's life. And you know what that is? The baby's going to die. These things are going to happen. Everything, insofar as it is at all, is going to pass away. We've already seen this with the cycle of samsara, but it's even more the case in Buddhism, right? Everything passes away, and insofar as we grasp at it, insofar as we give it a place and value it in a particular way, we will suffer. All life is suffering insofar as it deals with things. But this brings us to the second noble truth, that it's not the things in and of themselves that creates the suffering. The suffering arises from the second noble truth, craving. The only reason that we suffer, the only reason that this uneasiness exists within us, is because we grasp towards the perpetually falling away quality of these things. Suffering doesn't come from things. Suffering comes from the craving for things to be what they could not possibly be, to be permanent, to be eternal, to be static. This is not the nature of a thing. And insofar as it's not the nature of the thing, even though we want it to be, and we would have it be, This is what gives rise to suffering. Explains the third noble truth. In order to extinguish suffering, what do we need to do? We need to extinguish craving, right? And this is more easily said than done. Yeah, obviously you need to extinguish the craving. Obviously you need to extinguish this grasping, this wanting to have things be in a certain way. But how do you do that? I mean, if you want to extinguish the craving, one of the big problems that comes up is that you're craving to extinguish craving, which in turn makes you craving the craving of the craving of the craving of the craving ad infinitum, right? How do you do this? How do you extinguish this craving without reiterating it, without reinforcing it, without making it sort of feed upon itself? Well, this brings us to the fourth noble truth. And the fourth noble truth is one extinguishes craving by following the Eightfold Path. And the Eightfold Path is made up of a series of practices that involve right views, right resolve, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right endeavor, right mindfulness, right concentration. Actually, if you want, it's in the book. It's on page 28 of our readings. Now, you might ask with these, all right, so what makes these things right? Is it because the Buddha said they're right? No, actually, that's not the case. As a matter of fact, one of the interesting things that comes out of this in Buddhism is that what makes the Eightfold Path right is that it's done in accordance with the context that it's attached in. Not too much and not too little. Just like we heard on the river, right, with the music lesson. That one cannot grasp towards something and one cannot push it away. One cannot be like Gautama Siddhartha when he was a young man and he had everything given to him and he grasped towards it, and one cannot be like Gautama Siddhartha when he had reached his adulthood, when he went to the forest, when he became a sadhu, an ascetic, and tried to push everything away. Neither of these overcome the problem of suffering, because what they do, in essence, is generate a thing which we grasp towards and create a whole new problem. Instead, what one has to do is cultivate this capacity, cultivate this practice of being able to be present to something without grasping towards it and without pushing it away. To be, and this is a key word in Buddhism, to be mindful of it, to recognize the impermanence of it, and to recognize that impermanence absolutely, to cultivate this capacity to simply be present to something such as it is, neither treating it as something that you want, neither treating it as something as you push away, but simply something that is such as it is, such as it is. To organize one's being, to organize one's activity, to be able to regard everyone and everything, and most importantly, to start with regarding oneself as simply thus, as simply at this state, at this place, such as one is. This is how one begins to proceed along the Four Noble Truths, along the Eightfold Path. This is the way in which one becomes to practice mindfulness and the middle way, and this is the way in which one begins to pursue enlightenment.